All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of our ISCT colleagues around the world. I am thrilled to be joined this month by Dr. Jennifer Hollands. And because I think your position is quite unique and I would love to dig into that more, and we have a lot of questions to get to, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your current role.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me on here. It's a pleasure. So I am the Government and Academic Liaison for the company Cell Therapies. So we are a GMP manufacturer of anything cell-based, whether that be cellular immunotherapies or other types of stem cell based therapies. And not only do we sort of manufacture, I think what's key about the company is that we manufacture not only translational programs and clinical trial products, but also commercial scale products. So quite distinct for a contract development and manufacturing organisation. And we're based here in Australia, in Melbourne, which is a city in Victoria.
I would love to visit. Oh my gosh. I think I just missed the ISCT annual meeting that was held in Australia. I was so disappointed. But I cannot wait to hopefully, yes, hopefully again soon. We'll keep our eyes out for that. So your position at Cell Therapies is one that I personally had not heard of before. And I suspect that many of our listeners would also be curious about what you do in that role. So could you describe your role in a little greater detail, like what you manage day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. So the role really was, it is very recently developed. I'm the first one to take on this role for the company. And I think initially the overarching aim for this role really was to raise awareness of our CDMO capabilities, expertise and experience globally and nationally with government organisations as well as within the academic sector. But really what I think, this is a very autonomous role. I've been able to take it where I think it should be led, which is fantastic. And of course, this is a very external facing role. And so what I think this role has really developed into for because of the cell and gene therapy sector being so relatively immature, is really an education role in which I educate about the cell and gene therapy sector. So different types of potential therapies that are coming through, those that are marketed, that are available for Australian patients. And so when I look at talking to government organisations, it's about explaining what these innovative therapies are, how different they are to your more normal types of therapies and pharmaceuticals and biologics, how the delivery of these complex therapies differs so much compared to your normal regime and paradigm for treatment of patients. And of course, then the opportunities that the cell and gene therapy sector presents for Australia to be a leader in this sector. So that's really the government education piece that I sort of do. And then on the other side is that academic piece. And of course, I'm sure a lot of ICT members will recognise that there's a major understanding or education gap in how to really translate therapies from the lab bench to the clinic. And of course, I know here in Australia, when I was previously an academic, I know that we write about our translational therapies and that in 5 years, 10 years, they'll be in the clinic. But we really lack, as academics and researchers, the core elements of how to make a product safe and efficacious to go into humans. And of course, in the cell and gene therapy sector, this really revolves a lot around that manufacturing piece because, of course, cell and gene therapies, and when I'm usually talking about these, I'm thinking cell-based therapies generally, ex vivo genetically modified cell therapies. It's the manufacture that is actually driving the value and the therapeutic effect of these products. So it's such an integral piece that researchers, it would be great if they could start to understand, firstly, just how important that manufacturing piece is and when they're making protocols, testing, doing their animal studies, that manufacturing is super important, that they know what they don't know. So that's where I feel I try and help them understand it's fine. You don't need to know how to do everything, but you need to know that you don't know this. And where do you go for that? And our company is a great place for them to come to for that expertise around translation and product development.
Wow. I feel like I just had like a goofy grin and I was nodding this whole time during your answer because so much of what you were saying was resonating so deeply with me that I think both of us have a history, right, of coming from academia, coming up through academia. And now myself, I'm on the translational side in an academic manufacturing environment. And yes, like I feel like you were listening in on a meeting I had today where it was just, that's great that the researcher had an idea and came up with this, a way to produce it in your lab, but that doesn't mean it's going in a patient, tomorrow. The way that we have to do GMP manufacturing is quite complex, and there's a lot that you don't understand when you're just bringing a product up in the lab. And I understand that. I went through that same transition, in my fellowship, having to understand that GMP is a totally different language you have to speak, really. Which kudos to you for translating that for government. That is really, fighting the good fight for us. So I'm sure, that's appreciated. But actually what you were saying was jogging my memory that both of us came up and actually through academia, and we had very similar postdoctoral fellowships where we were using cell therapies to target like neurological disorders or to study neurological development. And I just thought that was so cool. And for me, that experience of using a cell therapy in that way was quite pivotal in getting me involved in this field. And I was just curious if that served the same role for you, or maybe how did it influence your training to get where you are now?
Yeah, so that's really key. I think I was really fortunate after my PhD, where I was studying human pluripotent stem cells and using them, in vitro to understand human development, those early stages. But then for my postdoctoral position, I went into a lab that was focusing on neurodegenerative diseases, normal brain development, and then looking at, disease in a dish. But then, of course, the extension of that is looking at the development of cell replacement therapies for different diseases or injuries. And our focus in our lab was using human pluripotent stem cell derived specific types of brain cells for the development of cell replacement therapies for diseases like Parkinson's disease, MND or ALS, as well as the potential treatment of stroke. And I think going into that neuro field is really exciting because it is very close to translation, and particularly in the Parkinson's field, where we now see, actual clinical trials using human pluripotent stem cell derived dopaminergic neurons translated into human brains for the treatment of PD. That is happening in America, via Lorenz Studer at Blue Rock, as well as in Europe with MacCallum, over in Sweden and a couple of other groups. And we were really closely tied with those research groups. So it was tangible, this actual translation of research, whereas before I was so excited about iPSCs and ESCs, but it always felt a little bit further away. And for me, the exciting part about the potential of pluripotent stem cells was that huge capability that could be there. And now, and we were, in our research, we were very close to that edge, and that really got me, really excited about that translation and commercialization. And so through my postdoc, I was fortunate enough to have a supervisor, a boss, who allowed me to go and sort of explore these other interests of mine. So translation, commercialization was one in which I tried to learn about that clinical trial regime, how to commercialize IP, how to identify IP, really, actually, and then get something to the market, how complex that is for pharmaceuticals and biologics, and then put on top of that a cell-based therapy. Super difficult and but still very exciting, the potential. So I did a lot of courses to understand that commercialization pathway, and having research that was closely linked to a legitimate commercial outcome, that really helped foster that interest. Very lucky.
That's so cool. No, I love hearing that. Shout out to all the postdoc mentors out there who are encouraging people to look at alternative pathways. Mine did the same thing. I think that's just the quintessential definition of a mentor, really, that they put your interests and your career goals ahead of their own. And I think, that's great to hear that you had that along your journey. And then that I was going to follow up on that experience where, what were some of these specific fellowships that you were able to do, or I guess courses that really allowed you to bridge that gap between academia and industry?
Yeah, so I call these kind of like my extracurricular activities that I would do outside of the lab, where I would undertake, sort of government-led programs, which were great about, commercialization of therapies. A couple of, I did an internship about commercialization, helped a lab identify some IP, wrote up a provisional patent, and those activities were really, really good for me and foundational for that. But of course, I also had other interests that I also pursued, and one of those is the development of evidence-based policy. So by being in stem cells, being in pluripotent stem cells, you come across a lot of illegitimate cell therapies that are getting into patients, and that really riled me up. And how can you stop that? Well, you can develop policy guidelines that don't allow such clinics to perform those activities. And then that interest I always had, so I saw that a really great industry body that we have here in Australia, it's called Science and Technology Australia. They run a lot of different initiatives for scientists, where you lots of different things like Parliament meets or Science meets Parliament, where scientists go to the Australian government. We interact with parliamentarians and senators and discuss research. So I was able to go to one of those events. But really, what was exciting was that I was eligible to become a STEM ambassador for the MP who was in my local electorate, who at that time, this was now Honourable MP Jen Kearney, and currently she's the Assistant Minister for Health and Aged Care. But back then she was in opposition, but she was really, her background was a nurse. She was really, really excited about research, medical research. And I had the opportunity to interact with her. And just talking with her, understanding where parliamentarians are coming from, their perspective, their understanding of science, and how to bridge that knowledge gap is really important. That we can't come into conversations assuming a certain level of knowledge, and that it's our job to help shine the light on this exciting research that's happening within that country, right? But secondly, we also bonded over some common challenges for women in STEM. And one of those was looking at affordable childcare, so that women who were making their way through research and through that career had the ability to maintain that progression within their career, even if they have kids, which of course, globally we see that's a major issue where women, they kind of stagger at those childbearing years, and a major issue. So we wrote, a piece on that that went out to the media, and just really advocating for women in STEM. And I guess really the first step is recognising that there is a disadvantage for women in STEM. So just getting, another piece of information, just getting the information out. But so that was a great interaction with government. And I think coming together, that commercialisation piece, interest in policy and government organisations, stood me really well for this current position in which I interact with government organisations, but also keep that researcher conversation going as well.
Right. Right. It's almost like languages that you have to keep fluent in. You don't speak
Yes,
them often enough. That's actually what I love about ISCT events, because I usually get to, meet up with my commercial, industry friends, academia friends, and you just keep those like neurons sharp, how to still
definitely.
converse with everybody. But yeah, that is I love hearing about your time with the government. Like I'm just in awe that that exists and that was a program that you could do. And yeah, how wonderful to set you up now for what you're doing. Like, do you still feel like that's one of your favorite parts of the job, like educating legislators?
Yeah, and I guess let's not put too much on that, educate. I'm not, a wealth of knowledge, a fountain of knowledge, but I just try to convey how exciting the sector is. But yeah, that's really exciting. This position is fantastic because not only do I interact with still that cutting edge science and talk to researchers about their core experiments and how it's going and understanding that, but then also being able to demonstrate that passion, that excitement, the opportunities of the sector to those who can actually help grow the sector. And that is, government, I think, has a big role to play in this particular sector, of course, across medicines, but and definitely this this more nascent cell and gene therapy field. It's such a complex field, a new paradigm shift for healthcare, that government has to be involved in this. So it's nice being able to communicate that to them.
That was one thing I wanted to jump in on, was that you like, from your vantage point in Australia, what is some like unique opportunities, also unique challenges that you're facing, in your sphere of the cell therapy world?
That's a good question. And of course, there's numerous ones. And I'm sure some of them are similar over in North America and everything. But, Australia, we are small. We don't have a very large population. We seem far away, even though it's not that bad. But those are significant hurdles to get over when, how I see the future of cell and gene therapies for Australia is, onshoring that whole value chain for cell and gene therapies. And there are a couple of reasons why we would want to grow that cell and gene therapy ecosystem. That's to, really get patients access to cutting edge therapies. And of course, because manufacturing is so key to those therapies, why not onshore that manufacturing piece? Why not integrate that into the healthcare networks that are required to deliver these therapies? And then also, obviously, there's a huge opportunity for Australia. We have great researchers, great minds, great education system. Why would we not leverage that to continue our manufacture of medical products to allow us to tap into new export markets, which is obviously an amazing opportunity for our country. And that is in recognition that our healthcare population is probably about 1% of the global population. So how do we onshore a value chain? We need commercial products, we need marketed products. How do we attract them to onshore manufacturing here? Well, we have to demonstrate an exciting market opportunity for them, and that would be access to the APAC region. And I think that Australia holds, high standard manufacture of medical products that can be trusted, easy access to lots of different locations and jurisdictions, high levels of stringent, regulatory standards, and those are all, major benefits. And then I guess more to that academic piece, growing that cell and gene therapy ecosystem. Well, Australia, I'm sure all of the viewers know, we've got great research here. We are hit well above our, average with that. But we do not translate and commercialise this IP onshore well. And if we do manage to commercialise Australian developed and led IP, well, it generally doesn't happen onshore because there's not as much investment at the moment in VC and that kind of thing. And also we need the capabilities to do so. So These are some of the bottlenecks, the hurdles that we have here in Australia. I'm sure some of those are similar to different parts of the world, but I think our location is one of those stumbling blocks, which I think is more of a mental hurdle to get over when thinking about Australia is the place to go to manufacture these cell and gene therapies. Our company, we have proven that we can manufacture commercial scale CAR Ts. We have that capability, built it up. We've probably taught and educated, the largest number of, the biggest part of the workforce for cell and gene therapies in Australia, because we're probably the largest, manufacturer here. So why not leverage those capabilities? Let's grow. Let's make more of us. Let's get bigger. Let's identify and really take on the opportunities that cell and gene therapies present.
Right. Do you find that, like, sort of pivoting to an ISCT lens, do you find that there are ways that being a part of ISCT has helped you sort of, ally yourself with other, people in the region, maybe to like kind of get stronger together, exchange ideas?
Yeah, really? Absolutely. And I think, not only would that be around clinical trials, as for these therapies, but also I think one of the pressure points that we're all feeling in the sector is workforce. So massive bottleneck for this highly skilled workforce. It's really hard to find people who understand GMP, people who have had experience. That would be amazing in cell-based manufacturing. It's not like biologics. It's not like farming. We're not talking scale up at the moment. We're talking scale out. This is a different way of thinking. One dose, one patient. And so this is really different. And so workforce is something that we can work with ISCT to help identify the problems. What are they? How do we find solutions? And I think we should keep working towards the solutions for this, because there's huge potential for great career trajectories within this sector as we grow. The different types of career paths, I think, are going to grow as well. And they'll provide outlets for scientists to, get out of academia. Or I guess really better is to dip in and out of industry and academia. Let's see that like cycling through and that sharing of knowledge from both sectors, which is probably very, very much required for cell and gene therapies.
Oh, I love that. No, absolutely love that. I'm all on board with your vision. I think that's so great. I was thinking too, when you were describing your role, that I think, a parallel to your role would be great to have on the academic side, whether that's like an education specialist to help people train, or, someone who's sort of coaching, maybe clinicians who have never brought a therapy through the lab before, right? Just in how to bring up their product, maybe, GMP, everything, just serve as that translation point. I see my role a bit as that, but I just think that as we get bigger and projects get more complex and labs get just more bogged down with, juggling projects from a lot of different directions, then I could see a world where that role becomes quite pivotal and required, in your basic academic industry, and you name it, really. I think, no, I love it. And I think people will be excited to hear that a role like yours exists out there in the cell and gene therapy space. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm excited to hear what kind of feedback we get from people around, the interest this might generate in pursuing that kind of direction. And actually, if people are interested in learning more from you, or, maybe connecting with you, how might they do that?
Yeah, so you can feel free to chat to me on LinkedIn. Pretty sure I've just got my name there is Jennifer Hollands. And of course, go on to the Cell Therapies website, and you can contact us that way, but also I'm sure we could share my email with them to get in contact via that way as well.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Jen, again, for taking this time to chat with me. This was really a fun conversation. I hope other people enjoy it too.
Thank you so much. It's a great opportunity.